In Lusaka, Zambia, the sun was shining brightly, and everything looked perfect. The garden was decorated with white roses and golden ribbons. Music floated through the air, and laughter echoed from every corner. Family and friends had travelled from near and far to witness the big day. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Tariro's life, her wedding day. Tariro stood at the edge of the aisle, dressed in a beautiful ivory gown that shimmered in the light. Her hair was styled with pearls, and her smile lit up the whole space. Her heart was full of hope, full of dreams, and full of love. She kept looking toward the end of the aisle, waiting to see Munya, her groom, the man she had loved for years. But he wasn't there. People started to whisper. The music kept playing, but there was a nervous energy in the air. Tariro tried to stay calm. Maybe he's just stuck in traffic, she told herself. Maybe something small came up. She looked at her bridesmaids. They smiled nervously. Zanele, her best friend, squeezed her hand. He'll be here, she whispered, but her voice shook. Minutes passed. Still no Munya. Tariro's smile faded just a little. Her hands started to shake. She took a deep breath and tried to stay strong. But deep down, a quiet panic was growing inside her. Where was he? What was going on? This was supposed to be her fairy tale, but something didn't feel right. The sun kept shining, but the mood had shifted. The wedding was supposed to start. The music was ready. The food was waiting. But Munya still hadn't shown up. Guests were looking around, whispering. Some checked their watches. Others tried to hide their concern behind polite smiles. But everyone knew something wasn't right. Tariro stood near the entrance, still in her gown, her heart pounding harder with every passing minute. She forced a smile as people passed by her. Inside, she was starting to feel dizzy. Where is he? She kept wondering. Why hasn't he come? Her hands were cold. Her feet suddenly felt heavy. She looked around, hoping for someone to bring good news. Zanele, her best friend since childhood, noticed the worry in Tariro's eyes and couldn't take it anymore. "I'll go find him," she whispered, already pulling off her heels. Without another word, she ran off, phone in hand, her dress flying behind her. Tariro waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. She saw Zanele returning, but something was wrong. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and her lips were pressed tightly together. She stopped in front of Tariro and opened her mouth, but no words came out, just a small, helpless shake of her head. That was it. Tariro couldn't take the silence anymore. "Zanele, what's going on?" she asked, her voice low and trembling. Zanele grabbed her hand. "Just come with me," she whispered. They walked quickly, past the curious eyes of guests, and into the quiet hallway of the hotel next door. Zanele didn't speak. She just led her to the elevator, then to the second floor, then to a door at the end of the hall. Room 207. Zanele stopped and looked at her. "Tariro, I'm so sorry," she said, voice cracking. Tariro, heart pounding, reached for the handle. The door wasn't locked. She opened it, and what she saw froze her to the core. In that moment, everything shattered. Her breath caught in her throat. Her world, her love, her dreams, all came crashing down. She had found the groom, but not the way she ever imagined. The door creaked open slowly. Tariro stepped inside the hotel suite, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. The room was dim, the curtains drawn, clothes were scattered on the floor, and then her eyes landed on the bed. There he was, Munya, her groom, still wearing his white wedding tux jacket, but it was half off, hanging from his shoulder, and next to him, under the sheets, was someone Tariro knew all too well, Chido, his ex, the same ex who had once broken his heart, or so he claimed, the same woman he had promised he had moved on from, the same woman Tariro had once trusted as an old friend. They both froze when they saw her. Munya's eyes went wide with panic. Chido grabbed the blanket and pulled it over herself. No one spoke. The silence was sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. Tariro didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't say a word. She just stared at them. Her face was calm, too calm. Her eyes empty, her soul numb. Then, slowly, she turned around. Her gown brushed the floor as she walked out, quiet and steady. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. She walked down the hallway like a ghost, each step heavier than the last. Zanele was waiting by the elevator, tears in her eyes, but Tariro just looked at her and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, let's go. She didn't fall apart, not yet, but something inside her broke, a deep, quiet break that no one could see. She had come to that hotel room expecting to find her groom, her partner, her forever. Instead, she found betrayal, raw, ugly, real. And in that moment, part of her wedding dream died. But another part, the stronger part, was just starting to wake up. Back at the venue, the guests were restless. The sun was beginning to dip, and the once happy chatter had turned into quiet whispers. People were checking their phones, fanning their faces, asking each other the same question. Where's the bride? Where's the groom? Then, the music stopped. Everyone turned. Tariro walked in, alone. She moved slowly but gracefully, every eye on her. Her ivory gown still shone, her makeup still perfect, but her energy had changed. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't crying. She looked calm, almost too calm. She walked straight to the stage, past the flowers, past the rows of family and friends. The whispers stopped. You could hear a pin drop. Tariro picked up the microphone. She looked out at the crowd, took a deep breath, and spoke clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady, "there's been a change in plans. Some people shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward. A few already had their phones out. The wedding," she continued, pausing just for a moment, "is off." Gasps filled the air. Aunties held their hands over their mouths. A child started crying in the back. One uncle stood up like he didn't believe what he'd heard. "But," Tariro said, raising her voice just enough, "the celebration, it continues." There was silence, pure shock. Then the sound of camera clicks, phones going up, live videos starting. Nobody could believe what was happening, not even her bridesmaid. She didn't give more details, not yet. She didn't cry or fall apart. She just stood there, tall and graceful, holding her head high for those who came to show love. She said, looking around the room, "Your love is not wasted, so let's eat, let's dance, let's celebrate. Not a wedding, but strength." And just like that, the band began to play again, slowly at first. A few people clapped, then others joined. The shock hadn't worn off, but something had shifted. Tariro stepped down from the stage. Her walk back was strong, steady, different. She may have walked in as a heartbroken bride, but she was walking out as something else, someone powerful, someone unforgettable. After the music started again, people were still confused. Some danced, some whispered, others just stood around, trying to make sense of what Tariro had said. But not long after, she returned to the stage, this time with a calm fire in her eyes and the microphone back in her hand. The room went quiet again. She took a deep breath and began to speak, not like a bride, but like a woman who had just faced the worst moment of her life and chose strength instead. "I know many of you are wondering what happened," she said. "So let me tell you." Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't water. She told the truth, all of it. "I walked into a hotel room today expecting to find my groom," she said, her tone steady, raw. "Instead, I found him in bed with someone else, someone from his past. And that was the moment I realized this wedding wasn't meant to be." Gasps, murmurs. Some people dropped their jaws, others covered their mouths. But she didn't stop. She looked around the room, at her family, at friends who had traveled far, at the strangers who now sat stunned in silence. "I could have broken down. I could have shouted, screamed, or begged. But I won't give my pain to someone who doesn't deserve it." She paused. "Let it sink in. Instead, I choose to let go with grace." And then she smiled, just a little. She raised her glass of champagne and said, "To every woman who's ever been broken and stood back up, to healing, to freedom, and to never settling for less than love." Someone in the crowd was already live streaming the moment. Cameras flashed. People clapped. Some even cried. Within an hour, the clip had been shared hundreds of times. By midnight, it hit 1 million views. People across the world were talking about the bride who turned her heartbreak into a mic drop moment. Tariro didn't ask for sympathy. She gave people strength. She didn't wear her pain. She wore her power. And just like that, her voice became more than a speech. It became a movement. After that unforgettable speech, Tariro became more than just the bride who got betrayed. She became a symbol. People everywhere were talking about her, not because of what happened to her, but because of how she handled it. Grace, strength, and honesty. That's what people saw. And brands saw it too. Within days, her inbox was flooded. Fashion houses, magazines, talk shows, and even global influencers wanted to speak with her. But one message stood out. It was from a well-known bridal fashion label. They didn't just want an interview, they wanted a partnership. "We saw how you carried yourself," the message read. "We believe you could change the way the world sees weddings and women who walk away." They offered her an endorsement deal to become the face of a new bridal line. But Tariro had a better idea. She didn't just want to model dresses, she wanted to build something of her own. So she created Unbroken by Tariro, a bridal and lifestyle brand focused on strength, healing, and confidence. It wasn't just about gowns, it was about telling a new story. A story where walking away from betrayal wasn't shameful, it was powerful. A story where love wasn't the goal, self-worth was. Her first campaign featured brides in bold colours, walking barefoot through fields, beaches, and city streets. Some wore veils, some wore crowns, none wore tears. The tagline, "You don't need a groom to glow." The response was massive. Women from all over the world wrote to her, thanking her for showing that heartbreak doesn't have to break you. Stores began stocking her designs. Celebrities started wearing her pieces. Even people who had never heard her full story felt connected to the message. Tariro had turned pain into purpose. She didn't just survive the worst day of her life, she used it to light the way for others. From the altar to the runway, from silence to a brand that spoke loudly, Unbroken by Tariro wasn't just a label, it was a movement. And she was no longer just a bride, she was a boss. While Tariro's star was rising, Munya's world was falling apart, fast. At first, he thought the buzz would die down, that people would forget, that maybe he could just hide for a few weeks and move on. He was wrong. The video of Tariro's speech had gone viral. Millions had watched her stand tall, speak the truth, and toast to her own strength. And with that truth came consequences. Munya's name was everywhere, and not in a good way. People knew what he did. They knew how he did it. On the day of their wedding, in a hotel room, with his ex. The internet didn't hold back. His Instagram followers dropped overnight. Brand partners cut ties. A company he was negotiating a deal with sent an email. "Due to recent public events, we are withdrawing our offer." His business, once respected, started bleeding clients. No one wanted to work with someone who could betray love that easily. His reputation was ruined, and not because someone made up stories, because the truth was loud and clear. Even his own family was shocked. His mother, who had always adored Tariro, called her to say, "I'm sorry, my daughter, you deserved better." His cousins took down pictures from the wedding pre-shoot. His aunt, who had helped plan the cake, commented, "Heartless," on a gossip blog post. And Chido, the woman he threw it all away for, she was gone within 2 weeks. Maybe she realized he wasn't the prize after all. Maybe she just didn't want to face the public shame. Either way, she left, without warning and without a goodbye. Munya tried reaching out to Tariro, a text, a call, even a letter. She never responded. Why would she? The man who once promised her forever had shown his true colors in the worst way. And now he had to sit in the mess he made, alone. People say karma takes time, but for Munya, it didn't wait. It came fast, sharp, and public. And while Tariro's name was being attached to power, elegance, and strength, Munya's name became a warning. A perfect example of what happens when you throw away a queen and think the world won't notice. A few months after everything, Tariro received an invitation that made her pause. It was for a women's empowerment conference in Accra, Ghana. They had seen her viral speech, followed her brand, and wanted her to speak about healing, confidence, and starting over. She said yes, not just for the event, but for herself. She needed space, new air, a place where no one looked at her with pity or curiosity. Ghana gave her that and more. Accra was warm, both in weather and in spirit. The people smiled with their whole hearts. The city buzzed with energy, music, and soul. When she walked into the conference hall, dressed in bold Ankara print and glowing with fresh purpose, people stood to applaud her. Some had tears in their eyes, not because they felt sorry for her, but because she reminded them what survival looked like. After her speech, she stepped down from the stage and was greeted by a tall man with kind eyes and a press badge. His name was Kwabena, a journalist. He smiled and said, "I wrote about your story, but seeing you now is something else." Tariro laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she'd had in a while. They started talking. Nothing rushed. No games. Just slow, honest conversation. They met for coffee the next day, then dinner, then another walk through Jamestown, talking about life, dreams, pain, and healing. Kwabena didn't try to impress her. He listened, really listened. He didn't see her as the woman who was betrayed. He saw her as a woman who rebuilt herself. That's what made the difference. For the first time in a long time, Tariro felt something soft growing inside her. Not fear, not doubt, hope. They exchanged numbers, stayed in touch after she flew back to Lusaka, and called often. There was no pressure, no promises, just a gentle connection that felt safe. And in that quiet, unexpected bond, something beautiful began. She went to Ghana, looking for healing. She left with peace in her heart, and the first signs of love that finally felt real. 2 years had passed since the day Tariro's world fell apart, and since she rose from it like fire. Now, Lusaka was buzzing again, this time for the annual fashion gala. Designers, influencers, celebrities, everyone who was someone in fashion was there, but the one person everyone was waiting to see, Tariro. And when she stepped onto the red carpet, time seemed to freeze. She wore a stunning black gown, fitted perfectly to her silhouette, with hand-embroidered gold and red phoenixes rising across the fabric. Each thread told a story. Each feather symbolized rebirth. Her natural hair was styled in a regal updo, and her makeup, flawless. Bold lips, fierce eyes, a vision of power and grace. People gasped. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, shouting her name. "Tariro! Over here!" "What are you wearing? How does it feel to be back?" But she didn't rush. She smiled softly and walked with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to celebrate. And in the middle of that crowd, standing in the shadows behind a velvet rope, was Munya. He had come with a friend of a friend, not expecting to see her, but there she was, glowing, untouchable, free. The moment he saw her, he instinctively lowered his head and turned away. He couldn't face her. Not now. Not like this. Tariro walked right past him. She didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She didn't even blink. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. She had already spoken her truth years ago. Tonight, she didn't need words. Her presence was the message. She did interviews, posed with designers, laughed with models, and later opened the show as the guest of honor. The crowd rose to its feet. She waved, proud and grounded. This was no comeback, because she had never disappeared. This was evolution. 2 years ago, she had been left at the altar. Tonight, she walked a different kind of aisle, one paved with strength, survival, and style, and the whole world watched her shine. Tariro wasn't just back, she was untouchable. The sun was setting gently over the ocean, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. The breeze was light, the waves calm, and the only sounds were the rustle of palm leaves and the quiet rhythm of the sea. There were no crowds, no guests, no pressure, just two hearts, ready to start again. Tariro stood barefoot in the sand, wearing a simple white dress that flowed with the wind. Across from her stood Kwabena, dressed in a light linen shirt, smiling with his whole soul. They didn't need a big ceremony. They didn't need applause. What they had was quiet, honest love, the kind that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, doesn't break. They had both been through their own storms. But now, here they were, two people who had found each other not through drama or chance, but through healing. As they stood there, hands gently held, Tariro looked into Kwabena's eyes and smiled. When it was time for her vows, she didn't read from paper. She spoke from her heart. "I thought my story ended the day I was left standing alone in a wedding dress," she said softly. "But I was wrong. That wasn't the end. That was life clearing space for something better, for something real." She paused, then added, her voice steady, full of peace. "Sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the invitation to your real beginning." Kwabena squeezed her hand gently. No one clapped. No one cried. But in that moment, the waves whispered, the sky glowed, and love, real, safe, steady love, wrapped around them like a warm blanket. This time, it wasn't about the dress, the ring, or the show. It was about choosing each other. And finally, Tariro had the ending and the beginning.